For quite some time now, there's been a fairly concerted effort to link violent video games to violent real world behavior. If asked what the likely purpose behind this goal might be, I would honestly draw a bit of a blank, short of maybe speculating that it's a boogeyman scapegoat of sorts that is used to shield against the reality of bad parenting. But even then, it's really just a guess. However, despite the motivation being somewhat shrouded, the effort exists, and even in the face of widespread scientific data to disprove that hypothesis, some researchers seem to always find a way to reframe the evidence in a disingenuous format so as to support their erroneous goal. Most of the credible data that we do have definitively suggests that there is no link whatsoever between violent video games and violent behavior, but still, articles like this one, based off of pathetically constructed studies, still find a way to suggest that a link exists. And my goal today is to outline exactly why and how this study and article are deeply flawed to the point of being completely void of all value. To set the stage, let's read the extremely short article. The headline reads off, "Study: Kids who play violent video games are more likely to engage with real guns." Pretty straightforward, right? Let's read on. A recent study conducted by the Department of Psychology at Ohio State University looked to further research the possible link between violent video games and real-world aggression. Here is the immediate problem. Playing a violent video game and being more likely to engage with real guns is an entirely different fundamental concept than linking violent games to aggressive behavior. So the article has begun on one foot and with the literal first sentence pivoted to a totally different premise. And that's just the beginning. Reading on. For this study, researchers paired off 220 kids aged 8 to 12 and assigned them to one of three versions of Minecraft. Some kids were assigned to a version of Minecraft with no violence, another with sword violence, and another with gun violence. The kids played the game for 20 minutes and then were led to another room with toys that included a cabinet with disabled but real handguns. 76 children played the version of Minecraft with gun violence, and 62% of those kids played with a handgun. 74 children played the version of Minecraft with sword violence, and 57% of those children played with a gun. 70 children played the non-violent version of Minecraft, and out of those kids, 44% touched a gun. Here we can see extremely manipulative language within the article. 62% of 76 is 47 children, 57% of 74 is 42 children, and 44% of 70 is 30 children. The largest gap here is only 17 children, in a study fully comprised of only 220 individuals, and with a true effective sample size of only about 70, with which to actually test the data. These numbers are so small that a 17-child difference amounts to literally nothing. It has no statistical value whatsoever. Here's a different way to frame it. If you roll a 70-sided dice 70 times, statistics dictate in an absolutely perfect world that you would expect to receive each number a single time, but that will almost never be the case. The likely scenario is that it will be far more diverse, with many numbers not coming up and others coming up in multiple instances. However, if you roll that same 70-sided dice 70,000 times, the probability that you get each number a similar amount of times rises dramatically, and the likely outcome is that it will still not be a perfect 1,000 value for each different number, but it will be far closer than the previous test to that expected value. Essentially, statistical studies like this one require as much data as possible. The more data you have, the more credible the study is. If you bring in one person randomly and examine their diet, you may find that they are in fact a vegan, and your study could then technically outline how 100% of people are vegan based on your random selection study, but you only evaluated a single data point. So if 1,000 people come in, you could find that only 10% of them are in fact vegan. The more data you have, the more participants, etc., the more value the study has, and thus credibility. A 220-person study with only 70 true data points is utterly and completely worthless. Nothing coming from this study has any shred of credibility because the possibility of it being a meaningless outlier is so high it discredits the entire premise. But regardless, that is still only the beginning. Moving on. Researchers also found that children who played the violent versions of Minecraft were more likely to point the gun at themselves or their partner and pull the trigger than those who played the non-violent version. Additionally, kids who admitted to consumption of violent media at home were at a greater risk of pointing the gun at themselves or their partner and pulling the trigger. The researchers in the study acknowledge that there are a couple of limitations to it. For one, the study was conducted in an artificial laboratory setting as opposed to a real-world environment. Secondly, even when playing Minecraft with guns and swords, it's still not a very violent game with no blood or gore. Researchers of the study said that they could not ethically expose children to more violent games that wouldn't be appropriate for their age group. Their recommendation is for gun owners to properly secure their weapons and for parents to try to reduce kids' exposure to violent video games. This is far from the first study to look into a possible link between violent video games and real-world aggression. Over the years, the studies have often contradicted one another, with some studies finding a link between violent video games and aggression, and other studies finding no link at all. It's clear that more research is needed on the subject, and with the World Health Organization classifying gaming disorder as a disease come 2022, it's likely that there will be plenty more research on video games and the way they impact players, especially kids, in the coming years. So there it is, an article with contradicting title and body material based on a study with a statistically useless number of participants that draws a correlation between playing Minecraft with guns and playing with real guns, as well as the behavior exhibited while playing with said guns. Here's the biggest issue. There is a long-standing, well-proven psychological scientific theory called the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect dictates that objects, items, sounds, or even faces become more appealing based on familiarity, proximity, and, you guessed it, exposure. This extends to everything and is true of life as a whole, not just video games. Furthermore, there is a direct correlation between the likelihood someone will engage with or buy a product and how much time has passed since they consumed relevant media relating to that product. If a child watches a movie about dinosaurs, they are far more likely to play with or desire to play with dinosaur toys in the immediate aftermath because it is the current theme that has most recently imprinted upon their subconscious. Now, for this next part, I will be evaluating the raw data from the study itself, not the article, because the study at least has consistent language, whereas the article says things like 62% of those kids played with a handgun, 57% of those children played with a gun, and then 44% touched a gun. This may seem innocuous, but it isn't. It's a deliberate way to further distance the children that did not play the violent versions of Minecraft from the exact same behaviors as the other children, and at the very least, the study itself refrains from such transparent tactics. This study took a statistically irrelevant number of children and had them play Minecraft for 20 minutes before putting them in a room that contained, quote, a variety of toys, unquote. But what the study does not discuss is what percentage of children played with a sword after playing the sword version of Minecraft, or if there were even toy swords in the room. It does not discuss whether or not the children were more prone to play stabbing each other with toy swords after the 20-minute video game session, and it completely ignores the long-standing proven phenomenon of mere exposure. If the children were to have been forced to play a 20-minute session of Minecraft that features rubber chickens, the likelihood that they would then turn around and play with a rubber chicken in the unfamiliar laboratory setting would drastically increase. The study effectively tried to prove something that has been widely accepted as true for decades. Even if we take this ultimately flawed study at face value, the end result is that it suggests that children ages 8 to 12 emulate the behavior they see around them, which is pretty damn obvious. The idea that a child would emulate the immediately previous behavior in an unfamiliar setting without typical parental supervision at that is accurate, but it does not explore new ideas. It simply reiterates existing ones in a statistically irrelevant way. The concept that children who play games that feature guns would be more likely to play with toy guns, or in this case real guns that do not work, so for all intent and purposes, toy guns, it is not shocking or unexpected. There is a reason that most games featuring gun violence are age restricted to a higher bracket than 8 to 12. There is also a burden of responsibility that must fall to the parents, not only to regulate a child's access to certain video games, but also to control the environment in which real firearms are present, and also to educate their children on what real firearms are and how to properly interact with them. If the primary education relating to firearms that a child receives is from Minecraft, that's a whole new set of issues. The study does acknowledge a few key points relating to firearm safety. At one point it outlines, "We found that having taken firearm safety courses reduced some risky behavior around handguns," though it attempts to try and downplay that statement with a self-admitted, non-significant study from 2002 in the very next sentence. And later in the paragraph it reads, "Additionally, children with guns in the home were less likely to engage in dangerous behaviors, which may reflect gun-owning parents or guardians teaching their children principles of firearm safety." Essentially, when you show a child entertainment content, they will then emulate that behavior in a play setting if presented the option to do so. If your child hears you say shit when you stub your toe, then they will sometimes say shit themselves, for no other reason than because you said it. But somehow this obvious phenomenon is being evaluated as if it is somehow an unexpected or unique correlation between children and firearms. This article from GameRant proposes in the very first sentence that there is a possible link, according to this study, between violent video games and real-world aggression, but no such link exists. The real world behavior is not aggressive, it is replicative, and is also mitigated by proper parenting, as are almost all detrimental child behaviors in existence. There is a decisive effort to demonize violent video games and pin real-world aggression and behavior on their influence. I am often unclear as to precisely who or why, but articles like this one from GameRant, based on studies as fundamentally flawed as that of the Ohio State University, pop up every so often. And it's important to underline exactly where they go wrong, because if this is what we can expect coming out of academia, then we need to reevaluate what the fuck academia even is within the United States. If credible data were to arise that shows a link between violent video games and violent behavior, especially behavior that is not fully mitigated by rudimentary education or parenting, then it would be an entirely different conversation, and I'm open to having that conversation, it's just not necessary right now. But the bulk of evidence available at the time suggests no such link, and the studies that do suggest some kind of correlation are either misrepresented or radically flawed. That's it though. Essentially, yet another badly constructed study was misused by a lazy journalist to tell a story that isn't exactly relevant or even accurate. So, just another typical day, I guess. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have merch, various memberships, and some other stuff as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.